It should be the 5th video. A series of videos just talking about how to present the case for antinatalism. Mostly a conversation about that. So we're left off where it was posed to me that I spend an inordinate or an unnecessary amount of time with the troll types who would make stupid accusations and stupid arguments, and I shouldn't waste time defending myself against stupid personal attacks, let's say. And I would agree, it's sort of a waste of time. Obviously, that's what they intend to do, is waste your time. Defending yourself against accusations for which they have no evidence, and so you're just basically explaining how I treated all my wives very nicely and never beat any of them, and blah, 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 blah. And people shouldn't do that in principle, because it just empowers the trolls. And, as a practical matter, you can never win, because they do force you to go off topic and off the agenda. And it also gets kind of personal, and therefore you get kind of angry, and you end up saying things that better left unsaid, maybe. But anyway, something like that. So that's sort of where we left off. I have to figure out what button to hit here for this purpose. So he was talking about Superhuman Dance, who essentially is an anti-natalist troll. I mean, clearly can't be doing anybody any good, throwing crazy accusations at people who, in every practical way, aren't doing anything that could be described as so out of bounds that they should be declared dangerous or destructive to the cause. I mean, it's a silly accusation. You want to accuse people of being less than they should be. That's a reasonable accusation, but otherwise it's just a waste of valuable time.
It just seems like I don't know if I should say this, but it seems like it's below you. And it's like, why are you not connecting with David Benatar or
well, I wish, yeah. I mean, part of that's my language and my personality, right? So we're going to concede that I'm too. I say things like dumb cunts. You can't do that, and so I have to clean my act up before those people will even take me seriously.
I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So it's an issue that's come up before. It's part of a little bit of obstinance on my part, in the sense that it's almost like the right to die. I've always been in the mood to kill myself, but I felt entitled to a decent death. I feel it's an entitlement a human being has to die as gracefully as possible, and I find it obnoxious that people would stand in my way. And so even though I had moments where I felt strong enough to say do it the harder way, a part of me just didn't want to, because that's letting them win. And I guess it's part of my competitiveness. I just don't like I don't like losing. And I'd say the same thing about this language thing. I mean, human beings who can't take language, words, you should just shoot them on sight. I mean, it's just too silly a reason to stop listening to somebody. I mean, I just can't even imagine. I mean, there's lots of little fairy words I don't like, lots of little silly words people use, and they just, cringeworthy. But if they're saying something that's meaningful or useful, I'm certainly not going to let that get in my way. And it's just this whole baby nonsense that somehow words are an excuse for people to run away is really irritating. Really irritating. But anyway.
That's what I'm saying. That I think you acknowledged already that you can't do this on your own, right? And and you certainly can't.
Well,
none of us can do.
All right. So yeah. Well, part of what I was saying is I can't stop other people. I can certainly on my own not be a rapist, and I guess I certainly could on my own make arguments to other people explaining why raping is bad. So, I mean, I could do that much on my own. I can't solve I can't cure the disease on my own. That's the argument I'm making. I mean, clearly, the human race, has to grow up, and just having a few humans grow up isn't going to work. So the humans that are capable of climbing up the wall of the maze and getting a look at it and seeing how stupid it is have to explain to the ones who just aren't smart enough to climb out of mazes and look around, can't do it right. They climb up and they see God and all kinds of other bullshit, So they're not really climbing. They think they're climbing, but they're just walking on the ground and they're having an imaginary experience, like they're seeing something. They're just seeing bugs and ants and, getting a God delusion. But anyway, I don't, no need to metaphor all the stupid ways you can describe delusions and ignorance. Regardless, the smart people, I'm basically arguing, have to organize and control the dumb people. That's just sort of, yes. So that has to be a group effort. Intelligence needs to grow up also. Take responsibility for the role it is in, whether it's chosen it or not. I mean, you don't choose, but the fact is, if you know better, you have to talk better.
None of us can maximize what we're doing on our own. It's just impossible. So I'm questioning whether you. Yeah.
I never intended to be a poster child for anything. So I always want to be, the chief of staff. I don't want to be the president. Okay, I want to be the.
So maybe that's a cop out on my part. But it's true. I just rather not have to change my personality and play a role. Be a politician. I don't like politicians. I don't like the whole theory of politician and lawyer, liar, shyster. I want to defend the truth, and I don't want to have to do it in a dishonest way. And yes, this is who I am, and I should not have to be afraid to be me, because any objection to me being me are based on nonsense. It's just, they're silly, nonsensical reasons. They're almost like racism. To worry about whether somebody has their hair in the right style, or whether they let a 4-letter word fly out now and then, is just too silly a reason to censor.
The guy who runs the president, okay? I want to be the guy behind, the puppeteer. I don't really want to be the puppet. So, but I understand that's the role I'm in, and I do feel the obligation to try to change.
Yeah, it's just a sad truth that no one's come along, with this charisma thing, to show how it's done. So until Mr. Charisma shows up and doesn't mind having other people help him construct his speeches, his propaganda, if he's a true believer or not, like I said, all he has to have is some idea that it's right, and he doesn't have to do all the thinking and the organizing of the story. But he can just be the good little pretty narrator. They do this, for nature shows or something. They pick the right person to do the voiceovers, blah, blah, blah. But no one else is showing up, so I'm stuck. That's all. So I understand. I mean, I gotta do both, and I really don't want to do both. But I guess I have to. But it's probably too late anyway, because, I've left such a dirty trail in my wake that they can always just go back to some previous version of me and say, this is who he really is. Yeah, that's true. That's who I really am.
My fundamental function. But just like John Cleese can't be John Cleese, it's hard for me to be somebody else. I mean, I can do it when I'm performing stuff.
I guess I'm just saying, yeah, you can't not be who you are. You can only play parts.
Right? When I have to, I can remember to be, I can be a character, okay? I can be a fake. But I don't like talking about
anyway, see, even that, a lot of reasons, I'm not a really good performance artist. I'm really not. I'm not good at lying. I'm not really, you know. I can be a character, but it's usually some kind of satirical character. I don't, I don't do versions of anything very accurately. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I understand the point. Criticism, take it. It's a fair critique. I should work on my performance skills.
Natalism in a fake way because it's it's a visceral subject. You're sitting here fighting for the victims. I feel insincere to be putting on the dress and performing the appropriate behavior to be presentable. But I do know it's an obligation of mine. I am.
Yeah, I just heard saying it's kind of hard to not in the middle of the conversation get emotional when you're hearing somebody saying, "No, I think torture's fine." I mean, it's frustrating and irritating, and it provokes a reaction, and I'm not very good at suppressing those reactions.
Psychologically preparing myself for the day where I'm going to say, well, that was a nasty thing you said, and it's just totally inappropriate, instead of fuck you. So I will learn how to do that. I know I have an obligation. I'm working on it, and that's part of what I'm describing as my own failure. I'll admit it. I'm failing. Okay, I'm not winning. I'm not a winner. I'm not a success story. I'm an asshole. I'm admitting it. I'm an asshole.
Okay, enough. You're depressing me. Yes, I suck. I got it already. All right.
But I'm a robot. I'm doing the best I can. I mean, I can just say, that's all I can say is I'm doing the best I can. I know I'm bad. Okay, you don't need to keep telling me because I already know I'm failing.
I know, but you keep talking about it. Anyway, yeah, so, and I'm working on it, as it's possible to work on it in terms of what brain chooses things, and that's what it does. And so far, I guess you could say it's chosen badly, but I don't know. There seems to be a plan to all of this. People argue about the physics, but I mean, if I can win on the physics argument, it's going to give me a huge standing to make all kinds of other arguments.
Okay, I'm working on it. Okay, it might not look like it, but I'm working on it.
I think, by the way, I think it's a friend of mine who's actually here in the room at the moment. He often speaks to me about cleaning up our act, which is something you said, and I think it's actually fine. Like, for example, there are certain things that I edit my videos, right, and I edit out the stuff that's not as good as the stuff that I leave in. And then there's stuff that, a couple of days ago, I got so angry at home. If I would put that up on the internet, I wouldn't. I leave that stuff out. I mean, that's fine. I'm happy to say it. I don't mind admitting.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'd still say underlying this all is the first conversation you're attempting to have it with the people who are the most likely to get it. They just haven't, they already have some of these pieces. They've already had some shit in their life. They know some science. They know this is all kind of performance bullshit. We're all kind of fakers, just faking our way from a fake life. So they're kind of close. And they just have this inability to admit, oh yeah, this whole thing really is fail. Because there's parts of it they really do cherish, like their thoughts of their childhood romances or some other thing. They have these little cherished memories, and they really don't want to poo on them with this story that the whole thing was crap. So some little distance. They're a little distance from getting the right answer, from seeing the real colors of the maze, the real blood all over the place, and just how insanely expensive it all has been. So those are the ones you're talking to first, and those are the ones who aren't going to be bothered by our broken performance. It's only the really, really, really simpleton stupids, that you really have to, you have to do the Barney the dinosaur. They're really only up to that kind of scale of communication. You need to make it really simple for them, and everything has to be unoffensive. And they're the ones that come later. I mean, first we have to win over intelligent people. And intelligent people really shouldn't be bothered. They really should know that if they don't like me viscerally, that it can't mean too much.
I do that. And like you say, I just see myself as a poop machine.
Right. If I could change my name, I would change it into Draft Human. Okay, I'm in the draft stage. Okay, I'm still working on the final product.
I think, for example, another, in order for you to get this message out, this silver bullet message, you've got to be as slick as Caesar.
Exactly.
Right, but more importantly, you actually have to make the silver bullets first, the gun. So these are all processes. And so I'd say there's lots of silver bullet arguments, lots of stories. And some of that, I think, is revealed in the Old Fans F-List movie in terms of presenting some of those simple arguments in a way that is more viable as a piece of art, as something unoffensive because it is art. And it just needs to be, it just needs to be refined. You got to get a few of the impurities out to make this perfect product. And it's it's hard to say. It might need to be like the greatest story ever told, or all the great movies are 3 hours long. It might take a longer movie.
Exactly what I'm saying.
Well, that was too loud.
I want to be as beautiful as Shakespeare, signifying nothing. I saw that the other day. I said, I love that phrase, signifying nothing, because all of this, and it's just nothing. And I'm just saying, yes, that's the
Yeah, so and again, that just brings us back to the fact that this idea of how much futility there is in life and how much loss and how much waste has been around for a long time. And so this argument shouldn't be that hard to make, is that we just keep creating signifying nothing pie, and we're making it out of all of these feeling things that are being tortured, and it's just pretty much as stupid as you can get.
poetry we need. That's the I'm not defending my delivery. I'm just defending my arguments.
Okay, fair enough. I think, by the way...
Yes, and I'd say that some of that it's still a work in progress. Like I said, evolution's been a story for a long time, and clearly it was a story a lot of human beings didn't want to hear because they did think about it honestly. It's kind of funny that the evolutionists were sort of the nihilist glib in terms of not really thinking about what it meant as a truth, where the people who were afraid of it as a truth were afraid of it merely because it was quite horrifying to imagine that it's all of this carnage for no grand purpose, no God to please. Then it looks like an awful big fiasco to some of those people. So some Christians, if they're willing to state what they think of life in the context that they are wrong and there is no God, some of them will tell you that's a life they wouldn't want to live.
Even what you're doing right now, the smoking, if you can, I think you should just do that when you're not filming, right? Smoking tobacco is just not of all the habits, of all the drugs you could be taking.
Yeah, of all the drugs you could be taking, this is the one that's the most benign in terms of any kind of argument that it's a crime against your natural function or something. I mean, it's just a simple, vice of the, humans have had for a long time, just like coffee. And, it's a tea, English tea. What are you being unnatural and drinking that silly chemical for? It's just a chemical. It has a little bit of a downside risk to it. So what? I'm all for nobody ever needing to be a tea drinker or a coffee drinker or a smoker or a partier or for recreation or any other purpose. Um, these whatever they are drugs. Yeah, don't play with addiction. But clearly, nicotine's a tremendously addictive chemical, and yes, I'm addicted, so I smoke. Again, I should hide it. I should be like the fake Obama, a cigarette smoker who pretends he's not, lies. For what purpose? How is the truth advanced through a bunch of lies?
I'm not sure smoking tobacco.
Well, I'm just saying it's the one that has the most excuse because it's the only one that's truly addictive. I mean, it's as addictive as heroin to mice, So I mean, nicotine is a powerful drug, and I'll argue that.
Yes, I'm not defending it again. I'm an addict, and I was a natural addict, frankly. It always agreed with me. It's been very good to me. That's all I can say. So as drugs go, it fit my personality well, and we were very good friends, so to speak. And that's all. That's my only defense. And so you're saying I should, go through the process of this separation from my lifelong friend, because you people say so. Not because I say so, but because you say so. It's another you say so, you know what's best for me kind of argument. And it might not be best for me. It's best for some kid not to start smoking, but it's maybe not best for me to learn how to live without it when I've lived my whole life with it.
Because I am an addict, it helps my thought process. So in a way, I wouldn't want to have to. I mean, I have done it. I'm just saying.
Does it really help your thought process?
Yeah.
Yeah, these are conversations that probably aren't too useful, but and clearly people don't care about the truth anyway. I mean, they've just turned into this nicotine Nazis out there and this whole bullshit. They don't want to pay any attention to facts, but it's just a stimulant, and once you're addicted to it, you work better on it than off of it. Off of it means you're not doing too well because your system is saying, I need nicotine. It's completely distracted. And you're capable of focusing with it. Now, maybe it doesn't give you anything extra. It doesn't give you any extra focusing capacity. But once you're addicted, you are dependent on it to see straight. Just a fact.
Yeah, I mean, it's a stimulant. And it clears the... I mean, you got a mix of ideas. In a way, nicotine does force them to rise to the top. You know what I mean? It breaks the inhibition mechanisms to unclarity. It pushes things out of the fog. Is the way I would describe it. So,
yeah, I really didn't want to do this. I had I have no interest in defending any drug for any of its positive functions because they all carry enough negative ones that they aren't worth it.
Have you ever, by the way, just as an aside, which is, I'll come back to this question in a second. But have you ever tried any other drugs?
Yeah, I've tried them, but I've never been addicted to anything. I've never found any of them a solution to anything, or even really practical as a lifestyle. So, up to a few years ago, I used to get high a few times a year. Just out of like. You listen to 60s radio. Every now and then I'll get nostalgic and say I want to go back to being a teenager and being stoned all the time. But that's about it. It's just a nostalgic trip. I don't see it as any kind of enhancer to my function as an organism.
Yeah, I mean, we have a job to do, all that kind of thing. We really just can't, being human requires you not to be impaired. Or distracted any more than you have to be.
Okay.
I mean, just coming back to what we said before, I hear what you're saying, and I accept that it's hard for you to be someone that you're not, but in this day and age.
I know. I definitely want to be. I want to quit saying faggot and some other kind of stupid word. just because it had a different context, when I grew up than it has now.
Making excuses again, but it's just a fact, that the difference between people saying it, where it means something negative and where people are saying it to describe something that might be tied to, or peripherally related to, but it doesn't have anything to do with anything personal or anything to do with being gay, just a certain kind of being gay. I mean, it's like saying nerd, it really should, it's just the truth. There are such things as nerds, and there's jocks, and there's hippie, druggy people. It's no law against labeling them what they are. I mean, they're going to make pothead some kind of horrible Rudyism.
It's kind of funny how that is, because now people are throwing the nigga thing around, and that offends the hell out of me. It just bugs the crap out of me, because it's, yeah, you put an A on it. That doesn't make wop or kike or any of these other words friendly all of a sudden. Come on, get real. These are destructive language.
Yeah, you just can't make jokes out of the history of the words and the way they were used. They weren't fun words. You just can't convert them into fun words unless you abolish history.
Have you come across Thomas Metzinger?
No.
I'm. If I did, I wouldn't know him by name. I don't remember anybody's. Your name's what? Dave, Fred, George.
He's a professor of, I think, psychology, philosophy, psychology, something like that. German, and he speaks about what I think he calls it VAN, VANN, or something like that. But the idea is he speaks about a benevolent antinatalist AI, right? What he speaks about is that he says that.
Yeah, so this was kind of another subject that's, it needs a preface. And, even the very concept of AI, I've been pretty hard against, just because I don't think there's any such thing. I mean, you have to pre-program its values, and those are the very thing that we're saying you need high intelligence to be pure about, to do right, to do objectively and reasonably. So, unless you make your AI capable of sampling feelings, knowing what it is to feel bad and knowing what it is to feel good, it can't really understand the importance of things. Can't understand the difference between a stubbed toe and a nail in your eye. It really can't understand in any real way. And therefore its intelligence can't do anything real, because it doesn't have to deal with also the idea of trying to understand through the mechanism of this fact that we do. Some of the information we get is direct. The environment, we're conscious. We're sampling it. It's a huge amount of information you're getting by being conscious. And if you weren't conscious and somebody tried to explain consciousness to you, they couldn't use any example like, well, it's like being conscious. It's like having this, it's like having a feel. No, I mean, you couldn't describe anything really to something that's never tasted consciousness. It could never have an understanding of it.
An AI will come along and it will be programmed to see all that's going on, and it will be programmed to be benevolent, and then
but that's the trick, is there's no programming can be indestructible, so you have to make it in the hardware almost to make it a prime directive. You know what I'm saying? And because we have the prime directive because we personally experience pain, so we know it's bad, right? And we know it forever. We don't know it like for this long.
So I was sort of getting to the more complex argument about the fact that if you had an absence, all you had were the words good and bad, and you had no personal interest, no personal investment in those words meaning anything. That is, if somebody uses the words wrong, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden people are going to hurt you because you've given them an excuse to think bad is really good. So if there's no reason for this AI not to change the definition of words, that it would, because it makes the math so much easier if it just gets rid of this distinction between good and bad and just turns it all into the same thing. It's gonna sacrifice every bit of truth to the expedience of the math if it just ignores the differences.
We can't change it, right? Now, if we could just rewrite our program and make the bad thing into a good thing, just like with women or something, you're attracted to thin women, all of a sudden you just flip a button and you're attracted to heavy.
The other argument is that we already have all of this information, and an AI isn't going to make these decisions any easier about fundamental principles. I mean, should one person's gain be worth somebody else's pain? An AI isn't going to be able to answer that any better than we are.
Women or something, that's what the AI would do, right? If the AI has incentive to make its mathematical equation work, it doesn't care if it cheats. You know what I mean? The AI, you'd have to have programmings that prevent that. The only way to do that is to hurt it, make it pay a price. So we have to pay a real price for errors, right? An AI doesn't have to.
And what I mean is we make mistakes in these value equations. We are subjecting real things to real pain and suffering, and sometimes including ourselves by making a misjudgment, a miscalculation, smoking. You're compromising your welfare, and that's a real thing that happens. You pay real prices for mistakes, where an AI doesn't. There's no such thing as a real price from its perspective.
Pay any price for an error. It can do 2 + 2 = 3, and nobody's going to beat him up. No one's going to hit him in the face. No one's going to crush his CPU. So he'll cheat. And so I'm just saying an AI can't really work unless you make the idea of a feeling something that's in the heart.
You have to make its fundamental values as durable as ours, in the sense that we viscerally feel it. We know the difference between good and bad because we know the difference between a nail in an eye and a cupcake. And that difference is hard known. It's not something we can pretend isn't true.
Everywhere, that it can't escape the negative. Because good and bad have to be real to it. It can't be synthetic. If good and bad is just synthetic and there's no real good and bad, it's just an idea. There's the idea of good and bad. Then it will synthesize the two into nothing. It'll make them nothing. And they're everything, right? I mean, pain and suffering is everything, okay? And it won't stay everything to an AI.
Won't it be able to be programmed to be completely logical?
But if it can't feel, it can't know the most important fact of life, right? What's the most
How can it do logic if it doesn't have the 0 and the 1? I mean, it can't do bit logic. Can't really know the difference between good and bad by merely somebody saying, oh, there's this difference. This thing is bad and this thing is good. And now how are you going to get it to understand a concept like, no, you really can't force somebody else to endure the pain of something while you gain the gain and pretend that was a good deal. Because you would be willing to do it. You can't assume somebody else would. That's clearly obvious. But I'm just saying AI wouldn't be better at this. It just has frickin' program statements of good and bad. It doesn't have any knowledge of it. It doesn't know what being imposed upon is. How can it judge whether it's good or bad when it can't know what it is?
important thing is feeling. Feeling is the first piece of knowledge. Ouch. Ouch. Yeah, that's a really important fact. And the AI can't know it. The AI can't know it the way you know it. You can say something hurts. An AI could say, he says it hurts. Hurts is bad, right? And it's saying, well, what does bad equal? If it doesn't know what hurt is, so you have to give an AI a sample. You have to give it a sampling of hurt. You have to know, it has to feel a pain to know pain is really bad. Not synthetically bad, not just in words bad, but really bad. You see, it doesn't have any reality to its definition.
Okay. So anyway, I don't know what else to say. I mean, the subject of people thinking that hyper-intelligence, is based on the information we have, would have some kind of different conversation. I just don't think so. I think this is the intelligent conversation. The intelligent conversation is to say, what are you producing and how much are you paying to produce it? And there's a simple equation. Either it's profitable or unprofitable. Either you're making something of real value that somehow overwhelms the price you're paying for it. And I would argue that the only thing we make, the only thing that's ever positive, is overcoming some negative. And so it's impossible because there's no real good. You can only, if there's no mess for us to clean up in the universe, then there's no value to our existence. That's clean. I mean, our only value is in our capacity to mitigate against the bad. There is no capacity to do anything called a real good.
Why could it not be programmed?
I know, but how would you do that? How would you program it to know what is bad? Because as we're having this conversation, human beings don't agree on the definition of the word bad or harm. So unless you program it to understand exactly what we understand, which is, all pain is the same. If I have a broken leg or you have a broken leg, it's a broken leg. Unless you program it to understand.
When obviously most people aren't thinking that way. Most people are thinking, well, what's in it for me? How am I doing? And they're not evaluating the net product of their existence and what the implications of everything are and blah, blah, blah. So it's not that we need more brain to do it. We need more will to do the math.
Understand the nature of it, that it's a brain function that happens inside your brain, that your brain's creating value when it's having a feeling, then it won't be able to do the equations. It won't be able to do the economics, right? Because the economics is completely dependent on how much pain you're causing for how much gain, and it can't.
And all of this notion that there's a fairy tale that where the value is being accomplished in heaven or some other place, all these fake locations producing all this fake value. If you do it based on the real equation, which is what are sentient organisms experiencing, and if I put that all in a bowl, what color does it make? Does it make the good color or does it make the bad color? Is there more bad in the bowl or more good in the bowl? And I think obviously the answer is there's more bad in the bowl.
Just say, it can't say a pain of your cancer tumor equals, the compensation is the fun of ice cream cone. So ice cream cone equals, one ice cream cone equals an hour of cancer pain. You know what I'm saying? What kind of math is it going to be able to do? And if it's doing the math based on what...
Obviously, it's just going to be math based on whoever programmed it. So yeah, it's going to be of no use in this conversation because it's going to be as biased as the person who programmed the values, the equal signs that are inside the program.
We know the math is, which 2 plus 2 equals 4 kind of math.
Well, and we know that you can't make your happiness out of somebody else's misery, and that's the first rule you can't break. So right there, we're done having the conversation because it doesn't matter what good you can derive out of it. If you have to derive your good by sacrificing and compromising somebody else and putting them in a bad, even though you would love it. Apparently a lot of people love the idea of having cancer, okay? Yeah, it's worth it because I did all this other stuff that was worth it. Well, to me, having cancer isn't worth any of this other stuff. I mean, there's nothing, I'm not going to make the deal. I get to have whoever for a wife is for 5 years or something. Whatever the little prize you're going to give me. My virgins to go fuck. Excuse the language. To have relations with. What, and I have to throw in the deal cancer? Well, the hell with it. Keep your deal. I don't want your deal. Now, maybe you want the deal. I don't want the deal. Do you have a right to impose the deal when somebody doesn't want the deal? You have to force them to say it's a good deal? I have to buy your, pink Maserati for the price of $250,000 or something. I don't like pink, and the car's too loud, and you can't drive it anywhere, and it sucks up too much gas. It's absolutely useless to me. Well, why do I have to buy it? You buy it. Leave me out of it.
Or is it going to do the religious nuts math? Which is, you can torture a zillion animals and it doesn't mean anything. It's a 0.01% bad. Where me having a nice suit to wear, that's a 500 billion good. I'm just saying there's no, you have to have the formalization of what equals what. So the program is going to decide whether it's an anti-natalist or not, right? So you're deciding ahead of time what the conclusions are going to be based on what you say, what value is worth what value.
Yes, I sort of made that point again. Yeah.
AI can't do anything more than we can do, in that it has to balance two kinds of events on a scale. It has to balance fun on the scale with pain, and it has to come up with an explanation, an understanding. So I'm just saying that that's what you're going to be programming into it, is that understanding. And the antinatalist sees this, and the pronatalist is seeing this. And so the program will be written when you write the scales. I think you froze. No, you didn't. Okay.
There's a few other questions I had. Why don't you write?
Well, I suck at it, apparently. I used to be pretty good because writing was a little bit of poetry and you just kind of let it go. And this is another one of those focus things. It's almost like the more intelligent you get, the more perfect you want the argument to be, and the more scrutiny you're applying to every bit, every sentence.
I guess you get defensive too, because you see there's all this nitpicky verbiage police, these word games, the constant word games people play. And so in writing, understanding that they're out there, it's kind of daunting to know how they'll, pervert everything, any word out of alignment, any wrong adjective or adverb, or any any mistake you leave in not saying it perfectly. They will seize upon that as their grand territory to pretend they destroyed the entire argument because they destroyed a sentence that you wrote. So that's the part where you see it done. I mean, the quote mining that takes place of every character in history is just quote mined to pieces. Where they don't pay any attention to the fact that they were a different person when they were 25 years old than when they were 75 years old. Nothing, just no rational context, and they just decimate the character with word games.
And so I just get lost in saying, this isn't a silver bullet. This wasn't a silver bullet. I want the words to say more than I'm able to construct them into, and it has to be more perfect. And so I've sort of, I don't have many innate perfectionist impulses, but when it comes to writing, I trip over them all the time. So that's the real liability. I'm hoping.
I guess it's something that's probably a symptom of being on the internet and having to deal with so much of this heckling, that you just get to the point where, I can't tell any jokes because some asshole is going to find some piece of the joke to pick on,
Other people can do it better than I can take what I said in these thousands of videos I made, and they can consolidate it down into a coherent step-by-step story. But I do work on it all the time. I'm always organizing these thoughts about, even the idea of, I could say the word model to you, right? And
yeah, it's like what order you present the argument in, how you go from the, Barney the dinosaur to maybe Carl Sagan, and then to Inmendham. How you advance the argument through understanding and then get to the idea where, yes, you're an intelligent, sensitive human and you're capable of understanding something that just can't work.
And the real problem is that every brain has a model of how the universe works. And that what we're really doing is trying to get people to understand, see, this model, this one is coherent and it doesn't do anything.
Right, this is our biggest obstacle, is we're communicating with people whose model of reality has a whole bunch of delusions in it, a whole bunch of fakes, nonsense, circle of life, God, all kinds of mush. all right, that doesn't say anything about our reality and about the reality of our life experience and the life experience that takes place in the average sentient organism, what its likelihood to be is. So I've talked about even a board game, making a board game that you call it life. And in a way, it would be too frustrating for people to play because, as you push the little poker and it says what you're going to be, your fate as a living thing on Earth. Well, the likelihood is you're going to be some, algae. You're going to be some, bug, some microbe. And so then you say, okay, let's balance it against microbe. Well, then you're going to end up being some little inchworm, some little micro worm. And then, okay, let's balance it against worms so they don't come up all the time. Then it's going to be flies and other kinds of bugs and insects. And, it's going to be you'd have to hit that thing 1,000,000 times before you get to be something interesting, like an elephant. And the odds are that you're going to be an elephant that's not going to reach maturity. And that's the part that would be, that would be droned into people if they played the real game, is that this life cycle thing is a lot of really short cycles that just include a lot of hardship, pain, and death, and they don't include much else. Struggle and death. The whole maturating thing is tough, just squirming for your milk, as an infant, and it's all struggly.
Silly, and there's no magical forces in it, and this model is silly. Okay, and it has magical forces, and it doesn't really have anything to do with evolution and nature and all the stuff that's going on. You're just trying to say this is the right model. Your model is silly. Change your model.
Do you, that reminds me of one other thing, is that I'm sure you must have seen that there is a YouTube channel, I've forgotten what the exact name is, Grey Co or something.
Yeah, Grey Chow Cho. Yeah, he's taken my videos and putting them, taking the poetry out of them, the greatest lines, so to speak, put it to music, put it to images. And yeah, I watch that stuff. That's when I feel a sense of pride, as funny as it sounds, is when I see those videos. I'm like, wow, I really have done something. I mean, I really did accomplish some of this task,
Yeah, I mean, they're good arguments and well orchestrated or reconstructed. And unfortunately, though, they're still not the bullet. It's not enough. And just a sad truth. I mean, obviously, I think the more people that would see them, okay, that they would have an effect. So it's more just in the fact that none of it went viral or none of it's got the exposure it needs. But as statements, they're pretty good statements.
Well, I was going to ask you. I presume you appreciate what he's done there. I think he's done a really good job.
Well, like I say, yeah, it's not too easy to jerk a tear out of me, but yeah, I mean, some of them are just, they're just brilliant. They're exactly what I want to say, exactly how I want to say it, almost, and that's a great feeling. Just it's a great sense of satisfaction in seeing a perfect clip of yourself. It's like a really good picture, right? There's one or two pictures.
Yeah, so I'm trying to compare it to something else, but every now and then something happens in life that says, well, that was really good. That was well done. And it's just, you feel good about that, but you did it well. It's like throwing a piece of paper across the room to a garbage can. It's kind of a fun thing to do, and, goes right in. You're just like, yeah, good.
In your life where you say, gee, that really does look like me. The rest of them look like some other asshole, but that one really is me.
Is he a friend of yours? You know him?
Yeah, well, he's not exactly an unrecluse either, so I guess, yeah, no, but I think we know each other in the real sense,
He's a little babbly talk there. yes, we know each other. Spirit. Yeah. I get the programming. It's the kind of robot I can sort of identify with, maybe. Came off a similar assembly line or something.
Instead of to do what he did, he had to really know me to do it right, and he did it right.
So you don't think that coming back to AI, yeah? I personally think that that the advantage of AI is that it doesn't have any interest in keeping the game going.
But it doesn't have any knowledge of the game either. So that would be my, like I said, my.
Again, you can't teach it consciousness. You can't. Again, you can't explain something. It's like if there was a fourth dimension and somebody had been to the fourth dimension, they couldn't explain it to us because there's no references, there's no common thing. You can't say it's a little bit like water, or it's a little bit like a brick, or it's a little bit like the Empire State. There's nothing to compare consciousness to. There's no thing that's a little bit of consciousness or something that's it either is or it isn't.
The whole point is that if you give it a taste of pain and suffering, then AI, can be an objective judge, right? Because it won't be raised by its mommy, and it won't have these stereotypical nepotism.
But again, how would you raise it? So again, you'd have to just make it this feeling thing that pops into existence, and then you give it some knowledge of context for what it feels. And you still don't have any guarantee that it just doesn't turn into a psychopath and say, what's in it for me? If you give it feelings, then it's just going to say, well, I want to have some of those good feelings, and I don't want to have a sore butt, and I don't want to have a this, and I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to do any work. So now I have a real incentive to make the math really simple, because my job is to do all this math. Well, I don't want to do math. That's work. I want to have fun.
And attachments and all that stuff. So you're really talking about AI as being some sort of objective judge. A judge who isn't influenced by theatrics, doesn't care what kind of suit the lawyers are wearing, doesn't care about the bullshit, right? He's above the bullshit. So I'd say that's great, but again, the AI is crippled by the fact that we can't make it taste our feelings. It can't sample consciousness.
I'm not sure that it, perhaps we can...
Yeah, well, we just have to disagree on that one. I just don't see any logical hope for this idea of a abstract intelligence that somehow knows magically, what it means for there to be a nail in my eye. I don't think so. It just magically knows.
Discuss this in another time because, but I'm not sure that it does, right? I'd have to think about it probably a little bit more, but surely, an AI is all about efficiency, and a lot of what you talk about is the huge.
Yes, I talk about value equations, which is like doing an clinical view. Make it as scientific as possible, an accurate way of valuing and evaluating, and that's the best we can hope for. And AI isn't going to be able to do it better than us. We're the conscious beings. We know the feelings, and it's just about us putting those in some sort of appropriate context and recognizing that if I actually had to draw those bad straws, I wouldn't never put my hand in the hat.
But I'm just arguing that it's uneducated on the most important subject. Oh, interesting. We have a disconnect of some kind. See if that fixes. It's a little timeout thing. Technical difficulties. When I was a kid, things used to have technical difficulties. And so you have a little thing, technical difficulties, and
they play a little music. So anyway, so his internet went down. So I do have the rest, and we'll do that in the last part, and such and so forth and whatnot. So, till the next time, and such. Yeah. See you then.